For the last 50 years, the entire global economy has been running on a secret, a single, quiet handshake that built an empire, decided the fate of entire countries, and it all starts with the dollar bill sitting in your wallet. So let's dive in.
No, I'm serious. Take a second and really think about it. It's not backed by gold anymore. You can't go to the government and trade it in for anything real. So how in the world did this little piece of paper become the most powerful object on the planet? Why is the rest of the world willing to trade real, tangible stuff like oil and cars and electronics for these green pieces of paper that we can just print?
Well, the answer isn't in any economics textbook. It's actually more like a spy thriller. It's the story of a secret mission, born out of pure desperation, that created a system so powerful it has shaped pretty much everything for the last half-century.
Okay, so to really get this handshake, you have to picture the United States back in the early 1970s. And things were not good. The country wasn't just in a little bit of trouble. It was staring down the barrel of a complete collapse.
It was just this brutal 1-2 punch. First, in '71, Nixon gets on TV and slams the gold window shut. He basically told the whole world, hey, that promise we had to back our dollars with gold? Yeah, that's over. And the dollar just tanked. Then, just 2 years later, the oil embargo hits. Suddenly, there are gas lines wrapping around city blocks, the stock market is in free fall, the American engine was just completely seizing up.
So, in this moment of absolute desperation, the White House unleashes its secret weapon, a guy named William Simon. He was a Treasury Secretary, a chain-smoking Wall Street guy they called the Shark. And they sent him on a top-secret flight to Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, with one simple, terrifying order: save the American empire, and don't even think about coming home until the job is done.
So Simon lands and lays out a deal for the Saudi royal family that was just brilliant in its simplicity. Step 1, the offer. The U.S. will be your ultimate protector. We'll sell you our best weapons, we'll give you our military might. Nobody will ever mess with you again. Step 2, the condition. In exchange for all that, you have to agree to sell every single barrel of your oil only for U.S. dollars. No other currency allowed. And then, step 3, this was the masterstroke. All those billions of dollars you're about to make, you have to recycle them right back to us by buying U.S. government debt.
You see, this wasn't just some trade deal. This handshake was the blueprint for a whole new economic world order. They called it the Petrodollar system, and it became the engine that powered American dominance for the next 50 years. And how this engine actually works, well, that's where things get really interesting. This financial loop they created, this petro-recycling, was just genius. Think about it. Every country on Earth needs oil, right? To power their factories, to run their cars, everything. And to buy that oil, they now needed US dollars. So they'd send dollars to the oil-producing nations, who would then immediately turn around and send those exact same dollars back to the US to buy our bonds. It was the world's most profitable merry-go-round. And this is really the key to the whole thing. The system created a trap, a dollar trap. It basically forced the entire world to need our currency, creating this permanent, artificial demand for the dollar, no matter how bad our economy was or how many dollars we felt like printing.
The logic is just inescapable. If you're Germany or Japan or Brazil, you have to have oil. To buy oil, you have to have dollars. But you can't print dollars, so where do you get them? You have to get them from the one country that can print them, us. And to get our paper, you have to send us your real stuff, your best cars, your TVs, your food. We got the world's goods, and in return, we got to export our inflation. It was the ultimate cheat code.
Now, a system this critical to one country's power is bound to have challengers, and this is where we get into a pretty compelling, though definitely controversial, theory. It's the idea that any world leader who dared to step out of line and try to sell oil for the wrong currency would end up paying a very, very high price.
So let's look at the case of Iraq. The official reason we were given for the invasion was, of course, weapons of mass destruction. But this other theory points to something that happened in November of 2000. That's when Saddam Hussein announced that Iraq would no longer sell its oil for US dollars. He was switching to the euro. Now, from the petrodollar perspective, that wasn't just a political statement. That was a direct assault on the foundation of American power.
And then you have the case of Libya. The official story in 2011 was a NATO mission to protect civilians. But the petrodollar theory zooms in on what Muammar Gaddafi was trying to build, a unified pan-African currency. He called it the gold dinar, and he planned to back it with more than 140 tons of solid gold. It was a plan to let Africa sell its own oil and resources for real money, cutting the dollar out of the loop entirely. And what's wild is that we now have declassified emails that seem to support this. In one email to then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, an advisor named Sidney Blumenthal explicitly states that French intelligence was very aware of Gaddafi's gold dinar plan and that it was a huge motivation for them wanting to get involved in Libya.
For almost 50 years, this petrodollar system seemed totally invincible. But just recently, the United States made a decision that sent a shockwave through the entire global financial system. And all the threads of that 1974 deal suddenly started to come apart.
That moment was in 2022, when the U.S. and its allies froze $300 billion of Russia's foreign reserves. Well, that had never happened before on that scale. It was a complete weaponization of the dollar. And the message it sent to every other country was crystal clear. Those dollars you think you own in your central bank, they're not actually yours. They're a privilege that we can revoke at any second.
Well, that action sparked a massive reaction. All of America's rivals started scrambling for an escape hatch, and China built a brilliant one, a golden loophole. They created an energy exchange in Shanghai where countries can sell oil for Chinese yuan, and here's the killer part. They can immediately convert that yuan into physical gold. It's a complete, parallel system that bypasses the US dollar entirely.
And this isn't just one country acting alone. This whole de-dollarization movement is being supercharged by the BRICS alliance. I mean, you're talking about a group of nations that represents something like 85% of the world's population. They're not just complaining anymore. They are actively building their own separate financial world, a walled garden where they can trade with each other without ever having to ask Washington for permission.
And you can see the results right in the data. The foreign countries that used to be the biggest buyers of our debt, the ones who are recycling those petrodollars and funding our government, they're walking away. Major players like China are systematically selling off their holdings of U.S. bonds. The machine is starting to run in reverse.
So what does all this mean? Well, some analysts believe America is heading for what's called a Suez moment. Back in 1956, the British Empire didn't really end on a battlefield. It ended when the U.S. basically proved that Britain was broke and couldn't afford its empire anymore. So the question now is, when the world doesn't need our dollars to buy oil and doesn't want our bonds to save in, how can America afford its own empire?
Okay, so this isn't just some abstract story about geopolitics and history. The slow-motion collapse of this 50-year-old system is going to have a direct impact on your life, your savings, your retirement. So the real question becomes, how do you prepare for that?
Well, the sources we're explaining today suggest a big shift in how you should think about money. First, you've got to fire the accountant in your head. Stop counting how many dollars you have, and start obsessing over your purchasing power, what your money can actually buy. Second, pivot away from paper assets like bonds, which some people are now calling return-free risk, and think about hard assets like gold as a form of insurance. And finally, the most important investment you can make is in yourself. Your skills, your knowledge, that's the one asset that can't be printed into oblivion.
Now look, the slow unraveling of the petrodollar system doesn't mean the world is ending. It just means the rulebook for how money works is being completely rewritten right in front of our eyes. And while that transition could be chaotic, for anyone who is paying attention and understands the new rules, it could also be a time of incredible opportunity.
That secret handshake from 1974 is finally broken. A new world with a new set of financial rules is coming into focus. So the only question that really matters now is this: are you ready for it?